But I wanted to riff a little bit off of a blog post that Fred wrote earlier in the year, where he came back from an event that he did, I think it was up in Boston,
Right.
and wrote a few thoughts about lean startup. And I wanted to drill into those kind of core conclusions or bullet points that you came back with.
Okay.
The first one, and this kind of helps us understand a little bit about what lean means to you, actually, what you think it is you wrote that there's a very high correlation between the lean approach, lean startup approach, and the success, the performance of the companies in your portfolio.
Right. I mean, it's just if you went and took the 45 companies that we've invested in and looked at how much capital they consumed in, let's call it the first year after we invested, and then looked at, so that would be one column, which is amount of money this company spent in the year after Unisquare's invested, and then the next column would be how successful are they? Rank each one sort of on a 1 to 10 basis. I think you would see, just probably almost a perfect correlation between companies that have been capital efficient, and I know lean means way more than capital efficient, so I'm just going to use it as a proxy, and success. And what happens is that there's a lot of companies, and some in our portfolio, less and less every day, who get in this mindset like, well, we're solving a hard problem, so we need to invest years of technology before we can release something. And this is not like it's not like Twitter or Tumblr or any of those things. We got to solve some hard problems here, right? And those companies fail. Almost universally, they fail because the founders are fooling themselves that they think that they're solving any harder problems than anybody else. Like, all these problems are hard, but if you build something, get it out, get feedback, and see if anybody gives a shit, and then if they don't, iterate, then you'll get to a product that people do give a shit about, and just solving hard problems for hard problems' sake and building hardcore technologies. There are places in this world, I think, that still work that way, but I don't think the web works that way. We sometimes will take a shot with somebody. Joshua Schachter, for example, who founded Delicious, started a company called Tasted Labs, and we went in with him in the very beginning, and they did a couple pivots before they launched. They have something out in the market called Jig.com. If Jig doesn't work, they'll pivot, right? So with some people, particularly people that we have gotten to know very well and are comfortable with and like, and think they know what they're doing, we'll take that chance. I mean, it's always tough for me to pick one company. We have 45 companies now, and I don't want to pick.
Does that be the best?
I'm consciously trying not to pick one of the best.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pick a company that's kind of maybe a little surprising to people. But we have a company in our portfolio called GetGlue. Okay. How many people here have heard of GetGlue? All right, so reasonably well known now. So we invested with Alex and his team. Alex Iskold is the founder. We invested with Alex and his team when they had something that was called Adaptive Blue, and it was like a browser extension for Firefox. And he was doing this stuff around the semantic web, and we thought it was kind of interesting, and we liked Alex. And of course that went nowhere, and then they pivoted, and the second thing they did went nowhere, and pivoted again, and the third thing that they did kind of went nowhere, and then boom, he came up with the idea. And each idea, it was Sam who was up there before, right? It was each idea kind of informed the next idea, so these weren't random pivots. But he got to GetGlue, and it did that whole thing, right, in maybe 2.5, 3 years.
What is GetGlue?
It's GetGlue is a product, mostly a mobile product, although there's a web product as well, that people use to tell their friends and other people what they're watching on TV, what they're watching in the theater, what they're, it's sort of entertainment. If you think about Foursquare for entertainment, I really don't mean to sort of marginalize what they're doing by calling it Foursquare for something else, but I think that could give you a good example of what
Fraser
it is.
Kelton was actually the one who founded this meetup.
Oh, great.
He was the CEO and the OO.
Yeah. He's now working up in Canada.
Canada, yeah.
Right. So, you know, they did that whole thing on, now since they got to where they are with the Get Good product, they've raised more money, but they got that whole 3 or 4 pivots in on, I don't know, maybe $1.5 million, 3 years, maybe. They're spending like $500,000 a year, maybe a little bit more. And again, you know, the amount of money you consume isn't necessarily the only aspect of lean, but I think it's an important part of lean. I worry that our later stage companies don't use the lean methodology enough. I think it's kind of hard to maintain a lot of those disciplines when you are 200, 300, 400 people. And you know, some of the things that companies do, Zynga, for example, basically creates lots of little companies. They have what they call the studio model. And Mark is very fond of saying everybody in the company is a CEO of something. So it's a mindset that they want to take this big honking company and break it into lots of little companies. And within their studios, they can be very lean because they literally just say, you 8 people are going to go figure this out, and you have 6 months, and you have, you know, whatever, 300,000 or 500,000, and if you fail, you're done. You might not get fired, but you're done. Like, we're shutting this down, this project has failed, and then we'll figure out whether you're going to stick around or not. So that's lean within a big company, but it's a little harder if you're not organized in that kind of thing, where you have big engineering teams. I mean, you could do that also with product teams and stuff, but I do worry that the bigger our companies get, the less they can utilize the methodology. And I think it'd actually be a really interesting book, maybe for Eric to write after he finishes this book tour, about how one could architect a big company to be lean. I don't know, has anybody written that? You know, if you're gonna back a team through multiple pivots, then you're not really backing the idea, you're backing the team. So what is it about the team that makes you comfortable that they can do it? So I think you want a team that is highly capable technically, and I don't mean just software engineering, but also product skills, to be able to conceive of something, kind of architect it, and then create it and get it done pretty quickly. So you want strong technical skills. So a team, for example, that came to us and said, we're going to hire, you know, X third-party company to build our product, they're not going to be lean. Like, no matter what they ever tried to do, they couldn't be lean. I think also people who are intellectually honest, you know, who don't start drinking the Kool-Aid too much and getting too caught up in you know, their grand plans, but at least are honest if things aren't working. You look for that. And also the counter to that, I guess a little bit, is tenacity, the ability to stick through something when it's not so easy. And that's a tricky thing, because those two things work against each other. You want people to be tenacious about the fact that they're doing a startup, but not necessarily tenacious about a specific idea. Well, in Joshua's case, he started Delicious when he was working somewhere else, and it was a side project. He ran it out of a server in his closet in his apartment, and there were 3 essentially versions of Delicious that were called other things before he got to Delicious. So he had literally been building it on and off for 4 or 5 years before Delicious became Delicious and it took off. And so, you know, so what does that mean? Somebody who is actually capable of single-handedly, not building 1, but 4 separate web services. Somebody who was honest enough with himself to kill off 3 of them before he got to the 4th one. And somebody who was literally running the whole thing from a closet in his apartment. You know, I just think that sort of defines that kind of scrappy, you know, technically capable, creative, you know, kind of entrepreneur. And so, and he's still that way. And he didn't, lose that, when he made a bunch of money selling Delicious. So that's why we were comfortable backing him. But we, would recognize that same characteristic in somebody who walked into our office off the street. Another thing we really like to look for are people who, like Joshua had, who had been kind of obsessed about a particular thing for a long period of time. And I don't mean a particular product, but a particular problem they were trying to solve. Dennis Crowley is a good example of that, having built, when I first became aware of Dennis, he was working at Vindigo, which was a location-based product for your palm. Then he went to ITP, coming out of ITP, he built Dodgeball, sold Dodgeball, worked on a bunch of stuff at Google, left Google and started Foursquare. But every single one of those projects were more or less the same kind of product, trying to solve the same kind of problem, just through different, kind of approaches, different feature sets. So that's another thing that we really like, is someone who's kind of obsessed about solving a particular problem set. Well, I think, Sticky Bits, which was the project that Billy and Seth first started on, it just ran out of gas. I mean, it just didn't have any legs. Odeo, which was the company that Twitter came out of, kind of was the same thing. I mean, Apple came out with podcasting in iTunes, and the whole reason that Odeo existed kind of ceased to exist, and they were like, man, we're screwed, what are we going to do? So in those situations, in both those situations, I think it was very clear that the thing that they had been working on was just not going to work. In the case of somebody like Alex Iskall, each thing he was doing worked a little better than the thing before. It wasn't, Adaptive Blue, the thing we first invested in, I think had 100,000 users. It wasn't like nobody was using it. It just couldn't get to 1 million users. So I think a lot of this is more art than science. I think people just have to, step out of it. It's something you got to step out of it a little bit and look at it from, and I think investors actually can help, and friends and colleagues and such. Not colleagues inside your startup as much, but colleagues outside your startup. If everybody starts telling you, doesn't feel like it's working, then it's probably not working.
Well, you wrote that. You wrote early on, be hunch-driven,
Right.
later on, be data-driven.
Right. Well, I actually meant that in a different context, which is, if somebody came to me and said, I've built this product because I've done a lot of research and got all this data that suggests that this is the right feature set that will cause the market to adopt my product, I wouldn't invest. If someone said to me, I had this feeling about this for a long time and I really wanted to build something that would do this, and I have a hunch that the market really wants it, I'd be much more excited about that. Those are the kind of hunches. The turntable, Billy just kind of dreamed it up one night and coded it up, and there it was. That's a hunch turned into a product. What I meant by that is that the first release of a product, for sure, should be largely hunch-driven. And then as you start to iterate on the product, you want to get more and more data-driven. And I think that's a gradual thing. You want your hunch instincts to kind of go like this, and you want your data instincts to kind of go like this. There's no point. It's not like a step function. But at some point, where Facebook is today, where Twitter is today, most of the product innovation they do, not all, but most of the product innovation they do is coming from rich data that they have about how people are using the product. There still are cases of people who build great products, but because they just have no idea how to promote them, they don't see the light of day. But I think that that's a much smaller percentage of entrepreneurs than it was 5 years ago. I mean, Jack Dorsey said to me one time, I don't know how anybody ever launched a company in the days before Twitter and Facebook, because it's free marketing. But it's not as important. I mean, it used to be that shitty products would win because the people would hire good marketers and they'd figure out how to get people using shitty products. And today, I think more and more the better products win because marketing is much more level playing field. But there are people who are just so introverted and kind of unknown to anybody else that they just can't get the product out there, and that's unfortunate for them. but I think it's a much smaller percentage.